although almost nobody does it. Yeah, almost nobody doesn't turn in class quizzes in because we're doing them together and in small groups, so students tend to want to turn them in because they're generally getting perfect scores on them. So that's kind of why you want to turn them in. Am I speaking correctly when I say that, guys? Yeah, you generally want to turn them in because we are working, we at least like do like a circle the wagons at the end and make sure everybody understands what's being turned in. So it's even one less element of surprise than there is on the out of class quizzes. And that's great, right? Yes, okay. So let's say you've done an exam, 7 quizzes, 2 projects. How many points would that be altogether, total, possible? That's what I'm getting. 220? You're getting 220, right? 50, 170. Okay, now the computer now knows that. The website, the web page now knows 220 is the denominator of your fraction. You're going to now enter your numerator by putting in your individual assessments. So, how'd you do on that exam? Out of 100 points. You got 100. There we go. I like that. That's very nice. How about those quizzes? They're all out of 10.
7.
7? Okay.
7.
2 7s? You said 10s too.
9.
9? Good. Oh, 1 because you had a bad night. What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say you got an 8. Okay, so you're batting right around there. Projects out of 25, you got a 23 and a 15. There we go. Oh, take the average. We'll take the average of 15 and 25 and call it 20. So right now, if you hit calculate, it's going to say you are sitting on an 88.6%, which is a high B. It's a B+. I give the pluses without the minuses. All right. All's good. All's good. That's your 88.6% right now. I know most of you guys want A's. That's totally awesome. I think that's fantastic. So let's talk about that quiz you got a 1 on. This goes back to Blake's question about not wanting to turn quizzes in. Suppose you walk in that day and you've got this quiz and you know it sucks. But you know you didn't spend the time on it that you should have. You were up late, your dog was puking, you couldn't find anything to write on, so you wrote on the newspaper from 3 days ago, spilled spaghetti sauce onto it. And you know it's going to be crap, but something in you wants to turn it in because, again, I'm breaking that mold of the traditional American math student. They don't have to turn everything in this class. So let's just say, instead of turning that quiz in, you walk in that day and say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to turn it in because I want to ask Sean about it later because I didn't get a chance to ask anybody else about it beforehand. Or I want to talk to my classmates about it, and I'm not going to turn it in. Okay? So what does that do to your average if you don't turn in the quiz that sucks? It goes to a 92.4%. By just not turning, there's 2 ways to raise an average. There's to kick more ass, or there's to not kick ass less, if that makes sense. This is an example of the latter, right? You know this quiz is going to blow because you didn't get a chance to talk to your classmates about it, compare notes. Don't turn it in. You'll have opportunities to make up for it later. Tons of opportunities to make up for it later. So don't turn that quiz in that you didn't get a chance to turn your best work in. Is that fair? Now, that's one option. The other option is to go ahead, turn it in, get a crappy grade on it. But I also have what's called a rainy day quiz coupon, which I will mention more as the term goes on. It allows you to take one quiz, resubmit it with corrections to get all the points back that you missed. So the other way you could do it is actually leave the 7th quiz in there, but then resubmit the corrections to get the 9 points you lost back. And then when you recalculate your average, it's going to go up a smidge. It went up to 92.7 from 92.4. So of course it went up because getting a 10 on a quiz is better than not submitting the quiz at all because it's above your average. But just realize that's an option too for one quiz. Most students didn't use that last term. Very few students use the rainy day corrections. Yeah, Brian?
I thought you could only get so many points back.
No. On the exam corrections,
okay.
Yes. But on the quiz corrections, you correct it back to get the full 10.
Okay.
And again, that was a brand new idea I had last term. I might change it after this term. We'll see. Right now, your lowest possible quiz, you can resubmit with corrections and get the points back. What most students did last term was wait until the end of the term to use that. So they waited to see what their absolute lowest quiz was and then fixed it. You can totally do that. I did change one thing though. Last term I said, turn it in the last day of the term. That's fine. It's now the end of week 10, not the day of the last exam. And the reason was I got inundated with way too much stuff on the day of that. And it became truly a points problem and not a learning problem. So by pushing it back to week 10 in my mind, it's going to push it back to learning. You're actually taking the time, rather than just submitting it to get the points, you're taking the time to go back and giving yourself the time to go back and look at what you did wrong and make the corrections properly. Cool? And I'll talk more about the rainy day coupons as they become pertinent. So that's one thing we can do, of course, is to fix using that coupon. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Fair enough? Good. Good. All right. Fantastic. Any questions you got so far? No? We're good? Kind of clear? I mean, if you haven't had it before, this probably feels a little bit weird, and that's okay. That's okay. You'll get used to it as we go. I think it's a pretty agreeable way. Speaking of quizzes, this is called the Rules and Hints page. I'm not going to sit here and read this to you right now because there's no way in hell you look exhausted as it is. This is going to exhaust you even more. So this is your first quiz for Thursday. Is a true-false quiz on the Rules and Hints page. It's probably the same one you guys took last term, I'm guessing. I don't think I changed anything on it. So if you still have last term, you can resubmit it if you want. It's the only non-math quiz you're going to have in here. But I wanted to start the term off by giving you a quiz opportunity for week 1, and I thought that was the only fair way to do it, was to give you a kind of a welcome back to Rules Insanity welcome back quiz, true false quiz. If you haven't had it before, this is a trip through that Rules and Hints page. When you open the quiz, it tells you what to do. Click on the Rules and Hints, and then it requires you to go down and read through those to see what things, like, why does he have W's next to things? And can I email him whenever I want? Or can I email him assignments whenever I want? Will he make fun of me if I ask the questions? Those kinds of things are all true and false questions on that quiz. And it's what, that page is what you think about when you think about what a syllabus of a math course is. Thou shalt not. Commandments. Right? And so I'm not going to read them to you now. But I do want to give you 10 points for doing a quiz on it. So, have at it. So when are you going to bring that? Thursday. And the class? Beginning of class, little pile. One recommendation I got from at least 5 students last term, I want to start this, is have like different folders for all the stuff. Thank you for that. It was driving me nuts by the end too. So when you have a bunch of stuff to turn in, I'm going to have different folders on the desk. The projects go here, quizzes go here, corrections go here. So thank you for that. I was thinking about doing that when the students start noticing it, then I'm like, okay, I'm behind. I should have noticed it before then. So anyway, we'll have a folder for website quizzes on Thursday. I'll get that back to you on Monday, and we'll get a progress report out so you know how the hell you're doing. Cool? Questions? Okay? Good. Enrichment, many of you will never go to this page. It's okay if you never do. It's basically a work in progress page. It's I put all the helpful math links students have sent me over the years. I don't know how they found them. I've noticed that probably the best tool you can use if you don't want to use the tools that I'm giving you is just to go on, Google it. That's the best probably, and most students are using that. I got that when I asked on the survey last term, how many times did you use my YouTube videos of class, my YouTube videos of homework, my YouTube video quiz solutions, my PowerPoints, my quizzes, my exams, other resources. Other resources, at least a dozen kids said I just Googled stuff and I had to find it good. Fantastic. It's a great tool. It's a great tool. Just make sure it's correct. I found a bunch of wrong stuff. One of your last questions in here is going to tell you to go Google what is a p-value, and then to explain why the first hit you get is wrong. So you got to remember, anybody can post anything online, and you have to know how to interpret what you're reading. Sometimes, I use Google all the time to do calculations for me. You guys know that, right? You just type calculations into Google, it'll do calculations in the search bar. If you didn't know that, you do now. So I use it as a calculator constantly, I use it as a definition constantly, but you got it, when you're using it for learning, you have to make sure that what you're getting is legit. And it's interesting because this just came up, it was a paper you actually sent me that I had read about a month before, about the reporting of statistical findings in research journals. Very often, you may have heard the phrase publish or perish. You may have heard that, you may have never heard that. Depends on what your academic experience is so far. A lot of profs at research universities have to publish a certain number of papers per year. Get peer-reviewed papers published. The problem with doing that is, when you have to publish interesting findings, that means you have to go out and find interesting findings. Sometimes an interesting finding will be what we call in 243 an outlier. In other words, you might think that you have a die that rolls 6s more than it rolls 2s. This is a completely ridiculous example, but it's an example we used a little bit in 243. And you demonstrate it by rolling the die 20 times and you get 10 sixes. You go, look, I got 10 sixes. This die is special. So you might write that up in a journal. You get it peer reviewed and do the mathematics behind it, which would not be that hard to do for you guys, honestly. And then you publish that article. But what's the problem with publishing that article? It's not enough research. Because what I'm going to do, as soon as I read that, I'm going to go, holy crap, I wonder if my dice are special. And I'm going to grab the same die that you said you grabbed. You went down to 7-Eleven and bought a pair of dice from the big fuzzy dice and the air scent for the car. I'm going to go down and buy the same ones. I'm going to try my dice. And I roll them 30 times and I get 5 sixes. I go, what the hell? I got 5 sixes. And I roll the other one 30 times and I get 7 sixes. What the hell? Where are my 15 sixes that you got? 10 out of 20. So what the problem is, it doesn't get replicated. The study is not supportable because it's an unusual outlier event, but the idea of what makes an outlier is it doesn't happen that often. That's the problem with a lot of research. And that's the problem with Google. Anybody can put anything they want online, and if it gets hit enough times, it rises to the top of a Google rank. Just because something gets hit a whole number of times on a Google page rank doesn't mean the information contained in it is any good. You remember the Google bomb of George W. Bush back in, maybe you don't, you guys are pretty young. Remember years and years ago, you could type in failure in Google, press search, and the first thing that popped up was George W. Bush's presidential whitehouse.gov page. Do you remember that? You remember that? That was done by some clever computer programmers that they figured out how to load the page, the page ranking to push that to the top. Doesn't mean it's useful, it just means it's at the top of the rank. So you have to know how to interpret that research too. I'm going to hopefully have you guys doing stuff like that, not the failure research, but I'll have you guys being able to interpret what you're finding as well as finding things in this class. So anyway, here's some good students have told me they found useful online. This is a whole bunch of statistical stuff. Every once in a while in class you'll hear me say something like, and if you're interested in the nuts and bolts of why, you can check the enrichment page. Like for example, why is the 0.25 multiplier, you'll see this on Thursday, why is there a 0.25 multiplier in the sample size calculation? Okay, now I made a YouTube video for that too, that's linked into the extra resources page, but there's also a written version of it here if you want it. And I'm going to create more and more YouTube videos this term based on a few students asked for more math in the class last term. They said, I would love to have more math. I mean, everything was statistics, and that was really Bailey's like, what the hell is wrong with those people? So knowing that that was the minority opinion, but it was still like 3 or 4 people, I'm going to create YouTube videos that blow out the math. You won't be required to check them out, but if you want to see the math behind something, you'll have more resources, and I'll most likely link them off of this page too. So you don't have to ever look at it, Billy, if you don't want to do anything to make you upset. Rory, go ahead.
I probably missed this, but Math 244 is like Math 243, but with more variables and...
Not even that. It's a different... So Math 243, what we did at Math 243 was, I would say, here's a die. But you know what? A perfect example. What we did at the very end of 243 with the central limit theorem, remember what I did? I gave you those funny dice, and I said, write out the distribution of all the sums. Right? And then you drew this beautiful histogram, depending on which dice you had, which die you had, they were all goofy. That's 243. Collecting data, drawing a histogram. I said, what's the average of that distribution? You add them all, divided by 36, call it good. Math 244 is, here's a pair of dice. You can't see all the sides on them. In other words, you're given a one glimpse at a population. Can you determine the average of that population via a sample? And the answer is yes. You did it already. You did it in 243. That was the last in-class quiz you guys did in 243. You actually were able to create those beautiful bell curves, the sampling distributions, and the height of those bell curves pegged the averages. So that was a perfect example. It's drawing a sample and trying to tell something about the population from the sample. I got an activity we're going to do about 10 minutes to actually drive that point home again. But Rory, the big deal is 243 is what we call descriptive, which you remember from way back in the day. And 244 is inferential, which means that you're drawing a sample and trying to determine something about an unseen population from that sample. Whereas in 243, you had everything. You were able to collect the data set and report back on that data set.
This is like more real world.
Well, it's more of one aspect of real world, if that makes sense. I'm not saying descriptive statistics isn't useful. It's ridiculously useful. I'm using it all the time right now, those negotiations meetings I'm in. All I do is I collect old data from COCC from 85 to the present, and I plot them up in bell curves, and I plot them up in bar charts, and I plot them up on running, moving averages. It's all descriptive. I'm not trying to predict what's going to happen. I'm looking at this is what has happened over the past 3 decades.
This is more like you've got the sample size because they can't afford to get all the data type situation.
Nobody can. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, how many do we have? Suppose I think my drug is going to reduce chronic pain by 20%. How large of a sample should I draw to be able to detect that difference? It was also in your article, believe it or not, which was really cool. It's really the article you sent. Yeah. Oh, so many great ideas in there, all wrapped up. But yeah, it's more real world from a research standpoint, if that makes sense. If you want to see if a treatment or a drug or a therapy works, you have to use the techniques from this class. Now, you don't always have to do that. Sometimes statistics is just collecting stuff and reporting back. But if you want to infer something from your results, take it further, that's where 244 comes in. Great question. Great question. I think I've got a fun little activity we can play with here momentarily that'll drive the point home even more, bridge the gap. Great question, great question. So, you might never ever get into here. It's okay. It's okay. I won't take it personally. But every survey that comes back, where I have the class do surveys, 2 or 3 or 4 kids say, thank you for the enrichment page. It always answered the questions that I had that you couldn't take the class time to go into. So it's there for you if you want it. Outcomes, you'll never need this, most likely, unless you transfer out of COC, CROSU, and they need a syllabus. And I'll just send them this. So just email me if you do. And then here's college policy. That's the lawyer talk. Have to have that in there. And that, my friends, is the syllabus. Done. Yeah? How we doing? How we doing? Austin's like, thank God it's over. Thank God it's over. Any questions? Any questions all about this? I'm going to stop this again.